I'm just going to touch very lightly on huge topics here, but not everyone, just to get everyone on board of what seaweeds are and what they do and how they do it. So let's start with the biggest picture. This is the tree of life, the domain level. So we start with cellular organisms, many common ancestors. Things are a little foggy down here, 2.7 billion years ago. But the three great domains are the bacteria and the archaebacteria and the eukaryotes. And notice there are connections between these domains and between these lineages. Those are very important. Let's look at the eukaryotes. So we're just looking at that central domain, and we're seeing plants, fungi, invertebrates, and vertebrates in all from a tree derived from DNA. So if we follow, here's the center, we cleave off into this great clade here. This is where the plants live, including the vascular plants. Here are the green algae and the red algae. A completely different lineage includes the brown algae, and not only the brown algae, but a plethora of unicellular and multicellular creatures, some of which don't even have chlorophyll or chloroplasts. So this is a very, very diverse group, of which the brown algae are just one branch. So let's look at the relationship of chloroplasts with this smaller tree of life. Let's start down at the beginning here in the mists of time. The cyanobacteria evolved, and through primary endosymbiosis, chloroplasts, the organelles that contain chlorophyll and do the work of gathering light and making flesh, evolved. And as chloroplasts evolved, so did oxygen, which changed the world forever. So the primary symbiosis gave rise to two great lineages. One of them contained the greens, including flowering plants, conifers, ferns, mosses, etc. The other primary symbiosis includes the red algae. There was a secondary endosymbiosis that gave rise to the browns. Endosymbiosis, do you remember a unicellular bacterium-like ancestor engulfed by another ancestral cell, and that enslaved bacterium becomes an organelle and starts working for its host. And that's how we get those internal constituents of our cells, through these merging of lineages. When I was undergraduate, this seemed like a fantasy. It was proposed by Lynn Margulis and laughed at, and now it is in the books. It is dogma. So the four great groups of algae emerged, not closely related to each other, but related through their chloroplasts. And yet there's been huge convergence because they all live in the ocean. The sea part is more important than the weed part. These are ocean creatures that evolved in the ocean. The intertidal, the subtidal, I'll talk more about those as habitats, but all of them are ecosystem engineers. They provide oxygen for our atmosphere. They modify the environment. If you've ever seen a kelp forest, the waves break through it and are calmed by the density of the fronds in the forest. They actually change how the waves meet the sea, much like tidal marshes do for the land. They also create habitat on a smaller scale underneath the great kelps. So many species live in the canopy of the great kelps, many species. Similarly, in the intertidal, these seaweeds here are keeping a moist, damp environment for other creatures, both plants and seaweeds and animals, to live. So they are creating habitat in the near shore. The near shore is a small place. There's more big, deep sea than near shore. So all of this is extremely important. And of course, these are photosynthetic creatures that are fixing carbon and are passing that carbon along, either getting chomped on and fed on by herbivores, or by rotting, making particles that are captured by invertebrates that are fanning through the water searching for food, or even dissolved carbon is taken up by things through their skin. So the food webs that the seaweeds are the base of are extremely important in the ocean. The forms of seaweed are another great example of convergence. Convergence, when things that are disparate actually come to act alike, like all the seaweeds as ecosystem engineers, or here convergence in form. There are these sort of 5 basic forms of seaweeds, but the reds do it, the browns do it, and the greens do it. They all can be found in these simple forms. Simple in some ways, complex in others. Filaments are chains of cells linked and open to the environment. But as you can see, Claudia, that was a complicated chain of cells. Filaments can be very, very complex, very fractal, very amazing, although they are single chains of cells open to the environment. Blades are extremely common in the seaweeds, and you've already seen pictures of them. These are flat blades anchored. All seaweeds are anchored. Why are they anchored? If they weren't, they'd be on the beach. Just put it that way. Blades can come in all different forms. You'll be seeing some more pictures of them. Cenocytes are less common in cool waters in California. Cenocytes have no cell walls that partition the body into cells. There's really one simple cell, but they can be very, very elaborate. This is very common in the tropics, where you have those seaweeds that grow in the sand. They have no cross walls, and you can see that in this illustration. This cross walls, this none. So there's a continuous cytoplasm. Invertebrates can pierce and suck that cytoplasm to eat them, but they can heal themselves. Crusts, amazingly durable way to have a body. Low profile, often underneath other things, but often strongly, strongly perennial. Crusts have all the different species have crusts, sometimes in just parts of their life history, as you'll see. You'll be surprised how many crusts you see once you start looking at it when you go to the beach. And then finally, there's more complex forms, so to speak, which are also relative to other species, other creatures on Earth, simple, made of simple cells. But the kelps, for example, are highly differentiated into a holdfast region, stipe regions, floats, and blades. I'll get back to this, but I have to tell you that these simple categories are not very helpful when you're actually looking at the plant itself, because morphology is only one clue to who it is. I'll go on. Here's an example from Japan. This is several photos of the same species. In Japan, they thought they had 5 or 6 different species of Acrosorium, but in fact, DNA revolution has enabled them to see that, in fact, all of those were one species. This is called morphological variation or phenotypic plasticity, when one genome can express itself in a diversity of ways. On the other hand, these are all what we call red blades, red seaweeds that take on a blade form. These are all different genera, mostly not even in the same family, and yet they converge on this blade-like morphology and look like this. Very, very difficult to identify based on morphology because there are very few characters. The characters we do have are anatomical. What the inside of the plant looks like when you cross-section it can differentiate these blades. But even that anatomy can be convergent. So let's think like a seaweed. How do we pull all this off? First thing that's important is to have a large surface area relative to a low volume. A filament does that, a crust does that, blades certainly do, big flat blades with very little volume. And this is critical, especially for the acquisition of light. There are other adaptations for acquiring light, including floats that bring you up closer to the surface, or very, very concentrated pigments that collect every photon that bounces around on the bottom of the ocean. So it's very important to have a lot of surface area to collect light for photosynthesis. And also, all of the nutrients for seaweeds come from the water. That holdfast is simply an attachment organ. There are no roots. The nutrients come right through the skin, right into those cells that are out there in the ocean. And these nutrients, of course, include nitrogen and all the major nutrients. So we have this high surface area, low volume is very effective at collecting light and nutrients, and that gives rise to fast growth, which is another hallmark of seaweed species. They have to grow fast because many of them are torn up by the winter, by winter storms, or have short lives, short annual lives. And there's lots of turnover in the population. There are perennial seaweeds, but even the perennials get beaten back and need to grow quickly to put out more blades for the next season. The fast growth is also important for reproduction because these babies put out tons and tons of reproductive cells because it's a perilous place to settle and grow in the ocean. There's a lot of sand abrading you, there's sediment settling on you, there's creatures sucking you up or chewing you down. So fast growth and copious reproduction, hoping that some will make it, are essential. And I put protection under fast growth too, because if you're chewed on by the myriad herbivores out there that like to eat seaweeds, you can grow fast and reconstitute yourself. It's what we animals always would love to do too, is to lose an arm, grow a new one. So it's a kind of protection to get you to reproductive maturity, fast growth. So all of these things allow you to persist through time according to your inner schedule. Seaweeds have all sorts of textures and chemicals in their bodies that help them persist. Being flexible and tough help them persist in the ocean. Being hard and distasteful helps them persist against herbivores. So this is their defense, their texture and their biochemistry. So this is just a quick overview of thinking like a seaweed, but you can see how it all comes together, how morphology and physiology come together for persistence of populations. Having trouble moving to the next slide. Don't ask me why. Next. Okay, people. I have a quiz for you. It's a rhetorical quiz. No one's on the spot. If your blood pressure went up from some ancient memory. Of these three great groups of algae, which are most closely related? Remember those stars on the eukaryotic tree? The reds and greens are considered most closely related because they're both results of primary endosymbiosis. The browns are out there in their own private Idaho. What do you think might cause morphological variation? Think of that acrosorium slide. The environment, wave action, temperature, everything that acts on that body causes variation in form. And this causes trouble for identification. How do intertidal seaweeds promote invertebrates? By making habitat for them in the intertidal. In fact, they make a nice moist habitat even for those things that chew on them, like snails. But some of the seaweeds, especially the ones in the upper intertidal that I'm going to introduce you to, have chemical defense against those snails. So they both harbor the snails and are eaten by them. And then, of course, grow beyond them.